By the end of this lesson, you should be able to write equations of a line parallel or perpendicular to a given line. In this example, we're asked to write an equation in standard form of the line that contains the point 4, -8, and is parallel to the given line 3x plus 5y equals 4, and perpendicular to the given line 3x plus 5y equals 4. Now recall from a previous lecture that I mentioned there's two things that you need to write a line, because you're going to have to plug those two things into a formula. Do you recall what those two things are? Well, the first thing you need to know is you need to know the slope. And the second thing, you need a point. We were given a point, but we were not given the slope. So what we're going to have to do, step one, is to identify what the slope is from our given line. So our given line is 3x plus 5y equals 4. And recall, you can find the slope by simply rewriting the equation in slope-intercept form, meaning solve for y, and whatever is in front of x, that is your slope. So let's find out what our slope is. So the first step to solving for y, we're going to go ahead and subtract 3x from each side. Last step to solving for y, we're going to divide by 5. Recall, what you do to one side, you must do to each side and to all members of each side. When we simplify that, our line is y equals -3/5 x plus 4/5. So therefore, we can identify here that our slope, which is whatever the value is in front of x, -3/5 in this case, that is our slope. Okay, it doesn't include the x. The slope itself is just simply -3/5. So we're going to use that along with the point of 4, -8, and plug it into our formula so that we can identify what a line parallel to that. Now keep in mind, parallel lines have the same slope. So when I plug it into the formula, I'm plugging the same slope as this given line because I want a line that's parallel to that one. And so that is why I'm plugging in -3/5 as my slope of my new line. So we have our slope of -3/5 and our point of 4, -8. And we're going to go ahead and plug it into the formula. I always like to solve it using both methods, and that way those students who prefer slope-intercept form, you can see how it was done, and then for those of you who prefer point slope, you can also see how it was solved. So let's go ahead and do that on the next page. Okay, let's begin with the slope-intercept form first. So into the y equals mx plus b, we're going to remove y and replace it with our given y value of -8. Remove m and replace it with our given slope of -3/5. And the reason we are plugging the same slope into our new equation that we're going to create is because parallel lines have the same slope. So we must plug in the same slope as the given slope. We're going to remove x and replace it with our given value of 4. Remember, with the slope-intercept form, you don't know what b is. That is what you're going to find out. So when you plug in the given values, it's going to look like so. Now we're going to multiply -3/5 times 4. Anytime you have a whole number, you can rewrite it as a fraction if you like, and that would be 4/1. In doing so, your numerator, multiplying them together, will give you -3 times 4 which is negative 12. And then on the bottom, 5 times 1 will give you 5 as the bottom. So anytime you have a negative and a positive, it's going to make the whole fraction a negative. So it's negative 12/5 is what it equals to. Last step to solving for b, we're going to have to add 12/5 to each side. Now on the left side there, you need to combine those two numbers. You have a whole number and you have a fraction. One quick way to combine a whole number and a fraction, you can simply just put them together. Here you have a negative 8 and you have 12/5. If you put them together, you have negative 8 and 12/5. When you do that, what you do is you multiply the whole number times the denominator plus the numerator. So negative 8 times 5 is negative 40. Negative 40 plus 12. When you combine that top, it's going to give you negative 28 on top. Keep your denominator of 5, so b equals negative 28/5. Putting everything together, y equals, our slope is negative 3/5. Put an x behind that, and we just found out that b is negative 28/5. And that is our line in slope-intercept form. Now let's move over to writing this same line that is perpendicular to the given line. So if our given slope is negative 3/5, perpendicular slope of that, recall, would be of a different sign and the fraction flip, so opposite and flip. So instead of negative 3/5 of a perpendicular line, it would be a positive and not a negative. And then we'll flip our fraction, so instead of 3/5, it's going to be 5/3. So a perpendicular slope would be 5/3, and we'll still have the same ordered pair of 4, -8. But when we plug our values into the formula y equals mx plus b, keep in mind we want a line perpendicular to the given line. So we're not going to plug in negative 3/5, but rather we're going to plug in 5/3. So let's go ahead and plug that in, as well as our ordered pair of 4, -8. When we do so, it's going to look like so. So now I need to multiply the fraction of 5/3 and the whole number of 4. You can write 4 as a fraction by writing it as 4/1. In that case, what you'll have is 20/3 on the right side there. Last step to solving for b is to subtract 20/3. The fact that the signs are the same there, keep the sign and add the numbers. Remember, I told you you can also use the method of whole number times the denominator plus the numerator if you want to combine whole numbers and fractions. The bottom line, when you do that, b would equal negative 44/3, because whole number, -8, times the denominator, +3, that's going to give you negative 24. Negative 24 added with negative 20 is going to give you negative 44. Keep your denominator of 3, and so b is negative 44/3. Your line perpendicular then would be y equals 5/3 x, because remember, perpendicular is 5/3 slope. So 5/3 x minus 44/3, and there you have it. We wrote a line that was parallel to our given line, and we also wrote a line that was perpendicular to our given line. And now we're asked to write both equations in standard form. Recall standard form is where x is first, then y, and then the constant number is over on the right side by itself. So all we need to do is move the x terms from the right side of the equation over to the left side of the equation. So in the case of the parallel line, we're going to add 3/5 x to each side. And in the case of the perpendicular line, we're going to subtract 5/3 x from each side. Let's begin by rewriting the parallel line first. So I'm going to go ahead and add 3/5 x from each side. So notice we have it in some form of a standard form, but it's not the correct form because recall the coefficient of x should not be a fraction or a negative. So since it's a fraction, we need to clear the fraction. Recall, you simply clear the fraction by taking the denominator and multiplying all parts of the equation by that denominator. In this case, our denominator is 5. So we're going to multiply all three parts of the equation by 5. We can go ahead and cancel the common factor from the first and that last term there. And that's going to leave us with a standard form of equation of 3x plus 5y equals -28. Now let's move our attention to the perpendicular line. So to get that in standard form, we're going to go ahead and subtract 5/3 x from each side. Notice here that the coefficient of x is both a negative and a fraction. And if it is both, which violates the form of standard form, we're going to, instead of multiplying by a positive number, we're going to multiply by a negative number. So what number? Well, you always use the denominator because that will clear your fraction, because we want to kill two birds with one stone. We want to get rid of the negative and we also want to get rid of the fraction. So to clear a fraction, take the denominator. But this time we're going to take the negative of that denominator, which is a -3. Multiply all three parts of the equation by -3. And again, this will get rid of both the fraction and the negative. Because in the case of the first term, when we cancel those common factors of 3, when you have a negative multiplied by a negative, it's going to make that first term a positive. The second term, because I'm multiplying a positive and a negative, is going to make the second term a negative. The last term, I'm multiplying a negative with a negative. That's going to make that last term a positive. So when we cancel those common factors, we are left with the standard form of 5x minus 3y equals 44. And there you have it. Both the parallel and perpendicular line to the given line.